Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Quiet Life. Roman Dyer wiped the grease from his hands with a worn blue rag, the familiar scent of motor oil and metal filling his nostrils. His auto shop, Dyer's Fix-It, sat on the outskirts of Pine Ridge, Nevada, a small desert town where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were supposed to be impossible to keep. The irony wasn't lost on him. At 42, Roman had the weathered hands of a man who'd spent years working with his tools, but his eyes held depths that spoke of experiences far beyond carburetor repairs and oil changes. Those same hands that could delicately adjust a timing belt had once held weapons that could end lives from 1,000 yards away. The bell above his shop door chimed, and Mrs. Chun shuffled in with her ancient Honda Civic. "Roman, dear, she's making that noise again," she said, her voice carrying the worry of someone on a fixed income. "Don't worry about it, Mrs. Chun. I'll take a look and won't charge you for the diagnostic." Roman's voice was steady, warm, nothing like the clipped, efficient tone he'd once used to confirm kills over radio chatter. As he popped the hood, Roman reflected on the path that had brought him here. 15 years ago, he'd been Staff Sergeant Roman Dyer of the 75th Ranger Regiment's most classified unit, a team that officially didn't exist. They'd called themselves the Graveyard Shift, a six-man team specializing in impossible extractions and elimination of high-value targets. His spotter had been Frank Morrow, a wiry Texan with eyes like a hawk. Luther Rhodes had been their demolitions expert, a gentle giant who could level a building or defuse a bomb with equal precision. Casey Haas had handled communications and intel. He could hack into any system or disappear into any crowd. They'd operated in the shadows of Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, places where the American flag never officially flew. For 8 years, Roman had been the team's primary sniper, earning the call sign Phantom for his ability to eliminate targets and vanish without a trace. Then came a mission in Kandahar that changed everything. Intelligence had been wrong, dead wrong. Instead of taking out a terrorist cell, they'd nearly killed a family of civilians. Only Roman's last-second recognition of children's toys in the compound had stopped him from pulling the trigger. The mission was scrubbed, but the psychological evaluation afterward declared him unsuitable for further operational deployment due to moral injury and compromised decision-making capability. They'd offered him a desk job at Langley. Roman had chosen exile instead. "There you go, Mrs. Chun," Roman said, lowering the hood. "Just a loose belt. Tightened it up for you. No charge." The old woman pressed a 20 into his palm anyway. "You're too good to us, Roman. Jennifer is lucky to have a man like you." The mention of his wife brought a familiar ache to Roman's chest. Jennifer Dyer, formerly Jennifer Hoffman, had been the light that pulled him from the darkness of his past. They'd met 5 years ago when she'd moved to Pine Ridge to teach at the elementary school. She was everything he wasn't: open, trusting, beloved by everyone in town. Her laugh could fill a room, and her smile had been the first thing to make him feel human again. Their wedding 3 years ago had been the town event of the year. Roman remembered standing at the altar, looking into Jennifer's green eyes, and believing, truly believing, that he could leave his past buried forever. But lately, something had shifted. Jennifer had become distant, working late more often, her phone constantly buzzing with messages she'd quickly dismiss. When he'd asked about it, she blamed stress from the new curriculum requirements. Roman wanted to believe her, but 15 years of reading people for survival had left him with instincts he couldn't ignore. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, Roman locked up the shop and headed home to their small ranch house on Elm Street. The house was dark when he arrived, Jennifer's car absent from the driveway. Another late night at school, he told himself, but the lie felt bitter on his tongue. Roman heated up leftover meatloaf and sat alone at their kitchen table, surrounded by photos of their life together. Jennifer at the county fair, flour in her hair from the pie baking contest. Their honeymoon in San Diego, both of them laughing as waves soaked their feet. Christmas morning last year, Jennifer in the ridiculous reindeer sweater he'd bought her as a joke. His phone buzzed with a text. "Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you." Roman stared at the message for a long moment. In his previous life, he learned to trust his instincts above all else. Those instincts had kept him alive through dozens of missions behind enemy lines. Now they were screaming that something was very, very wrong. He finished his dinner in silence, cleaned the dishes, and settled into his recliner with a beer. On the coffee table sat a photo from their first anniversary. Jennifer curled up against him on this very couch, both of them glowing with happiness. Roman closed his eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to be that carefree. But in the darkness behind his eyelids, he couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet life he'd built was about to shatter like glass. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Foundation. The next morning brought no relief from Roman's growing unease. He arrived at the shop early, hoping work would quiet the voice in his head that whispered of deception and betrayal. The familiar routine of checking inventory, reviewing appointments, and preparing for the day ahead usually brought him peace. Today it felt hollow. Stephen Hansen's pristine black BMW pulled into the lot at exactly 9 a.m. Roman watched through the window as the man stepped out, tall, perfectly pressed suit, expensive watch catching the morning sun. Stephen was Pine Ridge's most successful real estate developer, the kind of man who'd never had grease under his fingernails or calluses on his palms. Roman. Stephen's voice carried the forced cheer of a politician. How's the best mechanic in Nevada? What can I do for you, Stephen? Roman kept his tone professional, though something about Hansen had always rubbed him wrong. Maybe it was the way the man's smile never reached his eyes, or how he talked down to everyone while pretending to be their friend. The Beamer's making a strange noise. Thought you might take a look. As Stephen handed over the keys, their eyes met for a moment. Roman caught something there, a flicker of smugness like a man holding a winning poker hand. It was gone in an instant, replaced by Stephen's practiced smile. I'll have it done by end of day, Roman said. Perfect. I'll have my assistant pick it up. I've got a busy day ahead, meeting with the school board about the new development project. The mention of the school board made Roman's stomach tighten. Jennifer served on the board, another late meeting she'd mentioned just last week. After Stephen left, Roman popped the BMW's hood. The engine was immaculate, no visible problems. He ran diagnostics, checked the belts, tested the fluid levels. Everything was perfect. Whatever noise Stephen claimed to hear, it wasn't mechanical. The shop's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Dyer's Fix It. Roman? It's Frank. Roman's blood froze. Frank Morrow, his old spotter, his brother in arms, the only man who'd ever been able to match him shot for shot on the range. They hadn't spoken in over 2 years. Frank, how did you get this number? I never stopped keeping tabs on you, Phantom. Old habits. Frank's Texas drawl hadn't changed, but there was tension underneath. I'm in Vegas. Luther and Casey are with me. We need to talk. I'm out, Frank. You know that. I don't do that work anymore. This isn't about work. It's personal. We heard some things about your situation. Roman's grip tightened on the phone. What things? Not over the phone. Can you meet us tonight? That old diner on Route 95, about 20 miles south of your town. 10 o'clock. Roman was quiet for a long moment. In his old life, when Frank Morrow said they needed to talk, it meant life or death. The man had never been one for dramatics. I'll be there. The rest of the day crawled by. Roman mechanically worked on routine maintenance jobs, his mind racing. Why were his old teammates in Nevada? What could they possibly know about his situation that would bring them out of their own carefully constructed new lives? At 6 p.m., Jennifer's Honda pulled into the driveway at home. Roman watched from the kitchen window as she sat in the car for several minutes, talking on her phone. Her body language was animated, almost flirtatious. She was laughing at something, her hand running through her auburn hair the way she used to do when they were dating. When she finally came inside, her demeanor shifted instantly. The bright energy from the phone call evaporated, replaced by a tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hey, honey, she said, giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. How was your day? Busy. Stephen Hansen brought his BMW in. Said it was making noise, but I can't find anything wrong with it. Jennifer's face flickered, just for an instant, before she turned toward the refrigerator. That's odd. Maybe he was mistaken. Maybe. Roman studied her profile, as she pulled out ingredients for dinner. He mentioned something about a school board meeting. "Oh, right. Thursday. We're discussing the budget for the new textbooks." Her voice was casual, but Roman noticed she wouldn't meet his eyes. They ate dinner with the kind of polite conversation that filled the space where intimacy used to be. Jennifer asked about his day, shared harmless anecdotes about her students, complimented the pasta sauce. It was a performance, Roman realized, a careful dance around the growing chasm between them. After dinner, Roman announced he was going out to meet an old friend. "Anyone I know?" Jennifer asked, but she was already reaching for her phone. "Just someone passing through town. I'll be back late. Don't wait up." As he drove toward Route 95, Roman's mind replayed every interaction from the past few months. The late nights, the distant smiles, the way Jennifer's face lit up when her phone buzzed. The pieces of a puzzle he'd been afraid to assemble were finally clicking into place. The diner was a relic from the 1950s, all chrome and red vinyl, sitting alone in the desert like a beacon. Roman spotted Frank's rental car immediately. The man's preference for inconspicuous sedans hadn't changed. Inside, his old team sat in a corner booth, looking like three businessmen on a road trip. But Roman knew better. He could see the careful positioning that gave them clear sight lines to all entrances, the way their jackets hung slightly loose to accommodate concealed weapons, the alert tension that never fully left men like them. Frank Morrow looked older, gray threading through his dark hair, but his eyes were still sharp as a blade. Luther Rhodes had put on weight, but retained the gentle demeanor that masked his lethal expertise. Casey Haas looked like he'd stepped out of an IT department, which Roman supposed he probably had. "Phantom," Frank said as Roman slid into the booth. The old call sign felt strange after so many years. "It's just Roman now." "Right, Roman." Frank signaled the waitress for another coffee. "We've been doing some freelance work out of Vegas. Corporate security, mostly. But Luther here bought some property out your way. Owns a junkyard about 15 miles south of Pine Ridge." Roman raised an eyebrow. Luther had always had a thing for collecting broken machines, claiming he could fix anything given enough time and spare parts. "It's a good investment," Luther said in his quiet voice. "Land's cheap, and people always need somewhere to dump their old cars. Plus, it gives me a place to work on my projects." Casey leaned forward. "We've been keeping an eye on Pine Ridge, just general awareness, making sure our old friend was staying out of trouble." And Roman's patience was wearing thin. Frank set down his coffee cup carefully. 3 days ago, Casey picked up some chatter. "Digital surveillance he runs as part of our legitimate business. Someone in Pine Ridge has been asking questions about you, specifically about your military record." Roman felt ice form in his stomach. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that only someone with serious connections could get answers to," Casey said. "Someone wanted to know about your psychological discharge, your reasons for leaving the service, your training specializations." And Roman, they got answers. "Who?" Frank's expression was grim. "We're still working on that. But whoever it is, they know exactly who you used to be. They know about us, about our missions, about why you left." Roman stared out the diner window at the empty desert highway. After 15 years, his past had finally caught up with him. But why now? What had changed? "There's more," Luther said quietly. "I've been watching your town, your wife's movements. Roman, I think you need to prepare yourself for some bad news." The world seemed to tilt around Roman as his old teammates laid out what they'd observed. Jennifer's regular visits to locations that didn't match her stated schedule, her phone calls to numbers registered to Stephen Hansen, the pattern of deception that any trained observer would recognize. "I'm sorry, brother," Frank said. "We thought you should know." Roman nodded slowly, feeling something cold and familiar settle in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had before every mission, the calm that came with accepting that someone was going to die. "There's something else," Casey added. "The person asking questions about you?" The inquiries came through Stephen Hansen's attorney. The pieces fell into place with crystalline clarity. Stephen Hansen wasn't just sleeping with his wife. He was planning something bigger, something that required knowledge of Roman's capabilities, his past, his vulnerabilities. "What do you need from us?" Frank asked. Roman was quiet for a long moment, staring at his reflection in the window. The man looking back wasn't the quiet mechanic of Pine Ridge. It was Staff Sergeant Roman Dyer, call sign Phantom, the ghost who'd never missed a shot. "I need to know exactly what they're planning," he said finally. "And I need to know soon." His old team exchanged glances, the wordless communication of men who'd trusted each other with their lives. "We'll find out," Frank said. "Whatever it takes." As Roman drove home through the desert night, he felt the last vestiges of his peaceful life falling away like dead skin. He tried to bury the soldier, but the soldier had never really died. He'd just been sleeping, waiting for the moment when Roman Dyer the mechanic wouldn't be enough. That moment had arrived. Chapter 3: The Listening Post. Roman returned home to find Jennifer already in bed, her back turned to his side of the mattress. The digital clock glowed 11:47 p.m. She didn't stir when he slipped under the covers, but he could tell by her breathing that she wasn't asleep. "How was your friend?" she asked softly. "Fine. Just catching up on old times." "That's nice." Her voice carried that same distant politeness that had become her default with him. "Good night, Roman." "Good night, Jen." He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware of every sound. The soft whisper of her breathing, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing on Elm Street. These were the same skills that had kept him alive in hostile territory, and now he was using them in his own bedroom. The next morning, Jennifer left early for school with a quick kiss on his forehead and a mumbled explanation about morning meetings. Roman watched her drive away, then made a decision that went against every instinct he'd developed over the past 5 years. He was going to investigate his own wife. Roman had always prided himself on respecting Jennifer's privacy, never checking her phone or questioning her whereabouts beyond normal concern. But those days were over. If Stephen Hansen was digging into his past, if Jennifer was involved in something that required knowledge of his military record, then the gloves were coming off. He started with her laptop, the one she left at home for personal use, while keeping her school-issued computer for work. It took him less than 5 minutes to bypass her password. Casey had taught him basic digital surveillance years ago, skills he'd hoped never to use again. Jennifer's browser history told a story. Searches for Nevada divorce laws, community property division, life insurance policies, and most telling of all, military disability benefits after death. The dates went back 3 months. His hands trembled as he scrolled through her email. Most of it was innocuous: school correspondence, online shopping receipts, messages from her sister in Colorado. But buried in her deleted folder, Roman found what he was looking for: an email thread with Stephen Hansen stretching back 4 months. The early messages were flirtatious but relatively innocent. Then they turned romantic. By 6 weeks ago, they were explicit, and in the most recent exchanges, they were conspiratorial. The investigator confirmed everything you suspected about Roman's past. Military discharge, psychological evaluation, the whole thing. If we're going to do this, we need to be careful. He's not just some small-town mechanic. I know what he is, Stephen. I've lived with him for 3 years. But you're right. We have to be smart about this. The life insurance policy is substantial. Your teaching pension, his disability benefits, plus the value of the shop and house. We're talking about close to $800,000, Jennifer. Enough for both of us to start over somewhere warm. I hate that it has to be this way, but Roman will never give me a divorce willingly. And if he finds out about us, he won't. Trust me, I've got it all figured out. The Junkyard meeting will look like a robbery gone wrong. 2 lovers killed by desperate thieves. Roman will be devastated, but he'll never suspect the truth. Roman's vision went white around the edges. He forced himself to keep reading. Are you sure your people can handle this? Roman isn't normal. The things you found out about his military service. Relax, baby. I know exactly what kind of man your husband is, and I know how to deal with men like him. Thursday night, 10 o'clock at Luther's Junkyard. Tell Roman you're working late, then meet me there. We'll stage the scene. Take care of him when he comes looking for you. By Friday morning, we'll both be widows. The email was dated yesterday. Roman sat back in his chair, his mind ice-cold and perfectly clear. They weren't just planning to kill him. They were planning to kill Jennifer too, making it look like both victims of a robbery. Stephen would emerge as the grieving friend who discovered the bodies, probably after giving himself a convenient alibi. It was actually a decent plan, Roman admitted with professional detachment. Take out the target and the one person who could expose the affair in a single operation. Leave no loose ends, no witnesses who could contradict the official story. There was just one problem with their plan. Luther's junkyard wasn't owned by some random stranger. It belonged to Luther Rhodes, Roman's old demolitions expert, and one of the 3 men who'd helped him survive 8 years of missions behind enemy lines. Roman's phone buzzed with a text from Frank. Intel gathered. Call when you're alone. He dialed immediately. Jesus Christ, Roman. Frank's voice was tight with controlled anger. We monitored Hansen's communications last night. He's hired 3 guys out of Vegas, professional freelancers with military backgrounds. They're supposed to meet him at Luther's place Thursday night to handle a situation. I know. Jennifer's in on it. Silence stretched across the line. Finally, Frank spoke. Ah, hell. I'm sorry, brother. Don't be. I'd rather know. Roman's voice was steady, almost conversational. What do we know about these 3 freelancers? Casey ran their profiles. Jorge Godfrey, former Army Ranger discharged for assault. Renee Morton, ex-Marines with suspected ties to organized crime. And Eric Simpson, Navy SEAL kicked out for conduct unbecoming. They're not amateurs, Roman. These guys know their business. Roman nodded to himself. Where are you now? About an hour out from Pine Ridge. We started driving as soon as Casey cracked Hansen's encrypted communications. We figured you might need backup. Meet me at the shop in 30 minutes. And Frank, bring everything. Everything. Weapons, equipment, surveillance gear. Everything we need for a full operation. Roman. Frank's voice carried a note of concern. What are you thinking? Roman looked around the kitchen where he'd shared 3 years of breakfast with his wife, where they'd laughed together and planned their future together, where she'd kissed him goodbye this very morning while knowing she intended for him to be dead by tomorrow night. I'm thinking, Roman said quietly, that it's time for Staff Sergeant Dyer to come out of retirement. An hour later, the 3 men who'd once been the most feared wet work team in the U.S. military stood in the back room of Dyer's Fix-It, surrounded by equipment bags that had no place in a small-town auto shop. Body armor, night vision goggles, communications gear, and enough weaponry to outfit a small army. Luther spread detailed blueprints across Roman's workbench, architectural plans for his junkyard property. I bought the place because it was isolated and had good sight lines, he explained. 60 acres of desert, with a main office and processing facility here in the center. Multiple approach routes, but all of them exposed across open ground. Defensive positions? Roman asked. Plenty. I've got elevated positions here, and here. Luther pointed to several spots on the map. Plus underground bunkers I built for my workshop. The whole place is wired with motion sensors and cameras. Casey opened his laptop, revealing a real-time view of the junkyard security system. I can control everything remotely. Lights, locks, even the heavy machinery. We can see them coming from a mile away. Frank hefted a familiar rifle case. Your old friend is still here, Phantom. Cleaned and maintained, ready for work. Roman unlatched the case, revealing the custom-built .338 Lapua Magnum rifle that had been his constant companion for 8 years of covert operations. The weapon was a masterpiece of precision engineering, capable of reaching out and touching targets at distances exceeding a mile. Range cards? Roman asked. Luther smiled grimly. Already calculated. I've got firing positions surveyed and measured to every possible approach vector. If they come to my junkyard looking for a fight, they're going to get one. Roman assembled his rifle with movements so practiced they were automatic, muscle memory from 1,000 maintenance sessions in war zones around the world. The weapon felt like an extension of his own body. Familiar, comfortable, deadly. What's the plan? Casey asked. Roman studied the junkyard blueprints, his mind shifting into tactical mode. The quiet mechanic was gone completely now, replaced by the cold precision of a professional killer. We're going to give them exactly what they want, he said. A meeting at the junkyard. But not the kind they're expecting. As his old team gathered around the workbench, Roman began outlining an operation that would turn Stephen Hansen's perfect plan into his worst nightmare. By Thursday night, everyone involved in the plot against him would learn why Roman Dyer had once been the most feared sniper in the United States military. The student was about to become the teacher, and class was about to begin. Chapter 4: Preparation and Revelation. Wednesday passed in a haze of careful preparation and mounting tension. Roman went through the motions of running his shop, changing oil, rotating tires, replacing brake pads, while his mind operated on an entirely different level. Every customer interaction, every routine task felt surreal, like watching someone else live his life. Jennifer maintained her facade perfectly, chatting about parent-teacher conferences over breakfast and kissing him goodbye with lips that had spoken of his death just days before. Roman marveled at her acting ability. How long had she been practicing this deception? How many mornings had she looked into his eyes while planning his murder? At lunch, Frank arrived at the shop carrying a toolbox that had nothing to do with automotive repair. "Thought you might need some specialized equipment," he said loud enough for any listening ears, then lowered his voice. "We've got movement." Hansen's hired guns arrived in town this morning. 3 men in a white panel van, staying at the roadside motel out on Highway 50. Roman continued working on Mrs. Patterson's transmission while they talked. To any observer, it would look like 2 old friends catching up while one of them worked. "Surveillance?" Roman asked. "Casey's got eyes on them. They're being professional. No unnecessary exposure, staying in their room except for food runs. But they did drive by your house this morning and conducted a slow reconnaissance of the junkyard this afternoon. Equipment. Military-grade hardware. We managed to identify their weapons when they transferred cases from their van to their room. Assault rifles, tactical gear, night vision. They're planning for a professional hit, not some amateur robbery." Roman felt a familiar calm settling over him. In his previous life, the knowledge that enemy combatants were armed and dangerous had always sharpened his focus rather than increasing his anxiety. Dead enemies couldn't hurt you. It was the ones you didn't know about that killed you. "What about Hansen?" "That's where it gets interesting." Frank handed Roman a wrench with practiced casualness. "He's not planning to be anywhere near the junkyard tomorrow night. Casey found evidence of a hotel reservation in Las Vegas. Paid for in cash. Check-in time 8 p.m. tomorrow. Our boy Steven is setting up an airtight alibi." Roman nodded. It made sense. Hansen would let his hired killers do the dirty work while he established his presence elsewhere. When the bodies were discovered, he'd be the shocked friend who couldn't possibly have been involved. "There's more," Frank continued. "Luther discovered something when he was setting up our equipment. The property adjacent to his junkyard was purchased 2 months ago by a shell company registered to one of Hansen's business partners. They've been planning this for a while, Roman. This isn't some crime of passion. It's a carefully orchestrated execution." The methodical nature of the plot actually reassured Roman. Crimes of passion were unpredictable, driven by emotion and prone to sudden changes. But a carefully planned operation followed patterns, relied on specific timing and positioning. It could be anticipated, countered, and ultimately turned against its architects. "Timeline for tomorrow?" Roman asked. "Jennifer tells you she's working late at school. She meets Hansen at 9:30 p.m. We intercepted the confirmation message this morning. The hired guns position themselves at the junkyard by 9 p.m., expecting you to arrive around 10 when you start looking for your missing wife." Roman pictured the sequence of events. Jennifer would park her car at the junkyard. Then she and Stephen would wait for Roman to arrive. The 3 professionals would be positioned to eliminate all 3 targets, making it look like a robbery interrupted. Clean, efficient, and ultimately traceable back to no one. Except they hadn't counted on the junkyard belonging to a man who could level city blocks with kitchen chemicals and a timer. "What do you need from me?" Frank asked. Roman set down his tools and looked directly at his old teammate. "I need you to understand something. Tomorrow night, I'm not going to arrest these people. I'm not going to detain them for questioning. I'm going to kill every single person involved in this plot." Frank didn't blink. "Copy that." Jennifer, too. This time Frank did pause, but only for a moment. "She made her choice, Roman. She chose to come after a member of our team. That makes her a legitimate target. Roman felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of guilt and hesitation he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. These men had been his brothers for 8 years of warfare. They understood the rules of engagement better than anyone. ROE is weapons-free, Roman continued, falling back into the military terminology that felt like a familiar language. Hansen and the 3 contractors are primary targets. Jennifer is secondary but still hostile. Understood. What about civilian safety? The junkyard is isolated. No civilian foot traffic after dark, and Luther's security system will ensure no unexpected visitors. Collateral damage should be minimal to zero. They spent the rest of the afternoon going over the tactical plan. Luther's junkyard was a sniper's dream. Open killing fields with multiple elevated positions and clear sight lines. The compound's office building would serve as their command post, with Casey coordinating communications and surveillance while Luther managed the technical aspects of the operation. Roman would take the primary shooting position on a ridge overlooking the main approach road. From there, he could engage targets at ranges up to 800 meters, well beyond the effective range of the assault rifles the hired killers were carrying. As evening approached, Roman went home to face Jennifer one last time. She was in the kitchen, preparing what she undoubtedly believed would be their final dinner together. The irony was almost poetic. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice carrying that same manufactured warmth. "Productive. Fixed Mrs. Patterson's transmission, did some tune-ups. Nothing too exciting." Roman opened a beer and sat at their kitchen table. "How about you?" "Oh, you know how it is. The kids are getting restless with spring fever, and we've got those budget meetings tomorrow night." Roman nodded sympathetically. "Another late night?" "I'm afraid so. The district office is sending someone to review our textbook requests, and it could run pretty late. Don't wait up for me. I'll probably turn early anyway. I got a busy day tomorrow." Jennifer smiled, the same smile that had once made him believe in happily ever after. "That's my hard-working husband." They ate dinner, making small talk about the weather, the neighbors, Jennifer's students. She complimented his cooking, asked about his plans for the weekend, and expressed concern about a strange noise her car had been making. It was a masterful performance of domestic normalcy, delivered by a woman who expected him to be dead within 24 hours. After dinner, Jennifer excused herself to grade papers, shutting herself in their spare bedroom that served as her home office. Roman cleaned the dishes and settled in his recliner with another beer, listening to the sounds of her moving around upstairs. His phone buzzed with a text from Casey. "All positions confirmed. Equipment check complete. Ready for tomorrow night." Roman typed back, "Good hunting." He sat in the gathering darkness of his living room, surrounded by the life he'd built with a woman who'd been planning his murder for months. The photos on the mantle, the furniture they'd picked out together, the small domestic touches that had made this house a home. All of it felt like stage dressing now, props in a play where he'd been the only actor who didn't know the script. But tomorrow night, the script would change. Tomorrow night, Jennifer Dyer and Stephen Hansen would learn that some men were far more dangerous when you made them angry than they'd ever been when they were trying to be good. Staff Sergeant Roman Dyer, call sign Phantom, was about to teach them the difference between a quiet mechanic and a professional killer. And it was going to be a lesson none of them would survive. Chapter 5. The trap is set. Thursday morning arrived gray and overcast, with storm clouds building over the mountains. Roman took it as a good omen. Darkness would favor his team's technological advantages and limit the effectiveness of his enemy's numbers. Jennifer left for school early, claiming she needed to prepare materials for the evening's budget meeting. She kissed Roman goodbye at the front door, her hand lingering on his chest for just a moment longer than usual. "I love you," she said, looking directly into his eyes. "I love you too, Jen." The words felt like ash in his mouth, but they were still true. That was perhaps the cruelest part of the whole situation. He did still love her, even knowing what she was planning to do. After her car disappeared down Elm Street, Roman allowed himself exactly 60 seconds to grieve the death of his marriage. Then he locked that emotion away in the same mental compartment where he stored memories of every life he'd taken in service to his country. Personal feelings were a luxury he couldn't afford. Not today. Roman spent the morning conducting his final equipment check. His rifle case sat in the back room of his shop, along with tactical gear he hadn't worn in 5 years. Black utilities, body armor, night vision goggles, communications headset, the uniform of his other life. Frank arrived at noon with Casey in tow. They looked like insurance salesmen in their cheap suits and rental sedan, but Roman could see the careful positioning that kept their jackets loose and their hands free. "Status report," Roman said as they gathered in his office. Casey pulled out his tablet, showing surveillance footage from a junkyard. "Luther's been busy. The compound is fully prepared. Motion sensors active, security cameras online, defensive positions prepared and supplied. He's also rigged some special surprises in case we need them." "What kind of surprises?" Roman asked. "Let's just say our demolitions expert hasn't lost his touch. The main office building now has remotely detonated charges that can level the structure in under 3 seconds. Plus, he's positioned shaped charges at key points throughout the compound." Frank smiled grimly. "If these bastards want to play in Luther's sandbox, they're going to learn why we called him God of Thunder." "Enemy movement?" Roman asked. "The 3 contractors left their motel an hour ago," Casey reported. "They conducted one final reconnaissance of the junkyard, then returned to prepare their equipment. We expect them to move into position around 8:30 p.m., giving themselves time to establish overwatch and coordinate with their employers." "Hansen left for Las Vegas 2 hours ago. He's already checked into his hotel and been seen at the restaurant. Perfect alibi being constructed in real time." Roman nodded. Everything was proceeding according to the enemy's plan, which meant everything was proceeding according to his plan. "Communications check," he ordered. All 3 men activated their headsets and ran through call signs and radio protocols. Their voices crackled through the encrypted channels with the crisp professionalism of operators who'd worked together for years. "Phantom, Overwatch is online. Copy, Overwatch. Quarterback report. Quarterback active. All surveillance systems green. Thunder God, status?" Luther's voice came through with characteristic calm. "Thunder God in position. The playground is prepared for guests." Roman felt the familiar pre-mission clarity settling over his mind. Personal emotions evaporated, replaced by tactical calculations and operational focus. He was no longer Roman Dyer, the heartbroken husband. He was Phantom, the sniper who'd never missed a shot when lives were on the line. "Rules of engagement are weapons free on all hostile targets," Roman transmitted. "Primary targets are the 3 contractors, call signs Tango 1, 2, and 3. Secondary targets are Hansen and Jennifer Dyer, designated Alpha and Bravo." "Copy, Phantom. What's the probability that Alpha will actually show tonight?" Roman considered the question. Stephen Hansen was supposed to be in Las Vegas establishing his alibi, but Roman had learned never to underestimate an enemy's unpredictability. Low probability, but maintain awareness. Hansen might not be able to resist watching his plan unfold. If he shows, he becomes a target of opportunity. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Roman forced himself to maintain his normal routine, working on scheduled repairs while mentally rehearsing the night's operation. Every detail had been planned, every contingency considered, every possible outcome gamed and prepared for. At 6 p.m., Roman closed the shop and headed home for his final preparations. He would need to leave for the junkyard by 8 p.m. to get into position before the enemy arrived. But first he had to play his part in Jennifer's carefully orchestrated deception. She called at 6:30, right on schedule. "Hi, honey. I'm going to grab dinner before the meeting starts. It's probably going to run pretty late, so don't worry if I'm not home until after midnight." "Okay, Jen. I'll probably be asleep by then anyway." "Sleep well, Roman. I'll try not to wake you when I get home." The line went dead, and Roman stared at his phone for a long moment. Those were quite possibly the last words his wife would ever speak to him. In a different universe, one where Jennifer had chosen love over money, honesty over betrayal, they might have grown old together. But this wasn't that universe. Roman changed into his tactical gear with the methodical precision of a ritual. Black utilities, body armor, equipment vest loaded with ammunition and emergency supplies. He strapped his sidearm to his thigh and slung his rifle across his back. Looking in the bathroom mirror, Roman saw a ghost from his past staring back. The man reflected there wasn't a small-town mechanic. He was a weapon, honed by years of warfare and unleashed by betrayal. Time to go to work, he told his reflection. Roman left his house on Elm Street for what he suspected might be the last time. Regardless of how the night ended, his quiet life in Pine Ridge was over. There would be too many questions, too much official attention. Even if he survived, Roman Dyer the mechanic was about to disappear forever. But first, he had a job to finish. As he drove toward Luther's Junkyard through the gathering desert night, Roman's radio crackled to life. "Phantom, this is Quarterback. Tango 1, 2, and 3 just left their motel. ETA to your position in 30 minutes. Copy, Quarterback. Overwatch. Phantom is mobile. Overwatch copies. The party starts in 1 hour." Roman checked his watch. 7:47 p.m. In exactly 1 hour and 13 minutes, Jennifer would arrive at the junkyard expecting to witness her husband's murder. Instead, she was about to walk into the crosshairs of the most dangerous man she'd ever met. The student was about to become the teacher, and the lesson was going to be lethal. Chapter 6. Into Position. The access road to Luther's Junkyard stretched across 2 miles of empty desert, a ribbon of cracked asphalt under the star-filled Nevada sky. Roman drove without headlights, relying on night vision equipment and the pale moonlight filtering through scattered clouds. His rental sedan moved like a shadow across the landscape, invisible to anyone who might be watching. "Phantom, this is Thunder God." Luther's voice crackled through the radio. "I have you on thermal imaging, bearing 027 degrees, range 1,200 meters. Copy, Thunder God. Any movement from our guests?" "Negative. Perimeter is clean." Roman parked his vehicle in a wash about half a mile from the compound, concealing it behind a stand of Joshua trees. The junkyard sprawled before him like a post-apocalyptic city, towers of crushed vehicles, maze-like corridors between automotive carcasses, and the central office building rising from the chaos like a fortress. It was perfect terrain for what was about to happen. Roman moved across the desert with the fluid silence of a man who'd spent years hunting enemies through hostile territory. His rifle felt natural in his hands, an extension of his will made manifest in precision-engineered steel. The familiar weight of combat gear, the whisper of fabric against equipment, the controlled rhythm of his breathing, all of it brought back muscle memories from 100 similar operations. "Overwatch, this is Phantom. Moving to primary position. Copy, Phantom. Quarterback shows all sensors green. No movement detected." Roman's primary shooting position was an elevated ridge about 600 meters from the junkyard's main entrance. Luther had prepared it carefully, cleared sight lines, range cards for every possible target, and a concealed firing pit that would make him virtually invisible from ground level. As he settled into position, Roman's scope revealed the compound in perfect detail. Motion sensors tracked across the approach roads. Infrared cameras monitored every entrance, and Casey's technical wizardry had turned the entire area into a digital kill zone. Thunder God confirmed positions of special charges. Luther's response was immediate and professional. Primary charges placed at the main office building, secondary positions at the vehicle storage areas, tertiary charges along the main access road. All charges are remotely detonated and under Quarterback's control. Quarterback confirms surveillance coverage. Complete coverage established. Phantom. I've got eyes on every approach vector, thermal imaging active, and real-time tracking of all moving targets. You'll have advance warning of any movement within 2 miles of the compound. Roman adjusted his rifle's scope and verified his shooting solutions. 600 meters to the main gate, 720 meters to the office building, 580 meters to the primary approach road. Wind was minimal, barely 3 miles per hour from the southwest. Temperature was dropping, but stable. Atmospheric conditions were perfect for precision shooting. All stations, this is Phantom. Weapons check complete. Firing solutions confirmed. Rules of engagement are weapons free on all hostile targets. At exactly 8:47 p.m., Casey's voice cut through the radio chatter with razor-sharp intensity. All stations, quarterback. We have movement. 3 vehicles approaching from the south, range for miles, and closing. Thermal signatures confirm multiple personnel in each vehicle. Roman's world narrowed to the view through his rifle scope. Years of training and combat experience compressed into this single moment of absolute focus. His breathing slowed, his heart rate dropped, and his mind achieved the crystalline clarity that separated professional snipers from mere marksmen. Visual contact established, he transmitted. 3 vehicles. Appears to be the contractors plus support personnel. Counting, 6 distinct heat signatures total. Copy, Phantom. That's more personnel than we expected. Roman considered the tactical implications. The original intelligence had suggested 3 hired killers. Now, they were facing 6 possible hostiles. A full squad rather than small team. All stations, be advised we have additional personnel. Adjust plans accordingly. The 3 vehicles approached the junkyard with professional caution, stopping about 200 meters from the main entrance. Roman watched through his scope as 6 men emerged from the cars, all carrying military-style weapons and moving with the disciplined positioning of trained. Casey's fingers flew across his keyboard, analyzing thermal signatures and movement patterns. Confirmed identification on Tango 1, 2, and 3. Those are our original targets. The other 3, unknown contacts, but their equipment and movement patterns suggest military or law enforcement background. Roman felt ice form in his stomach. Steven Hansen hadn't just hired 3 freelancers. He'd assembled a professional kill team. Thunder God, are you seeing this? Luther's voice was grim. I see it, Phantom. Looks like they brought friends to the party. The 6-man team moved with textbook precision, establishing a perimeter around the compound while their leader, clearly Tango 1 based on his command presence, surveyed the target area through night vision equipment. Roman keyed his radio. All stations, enemy strength is now 6 personnel, all armed and apparently professional. Maintain position and await my command. At 9:15 p.m., Jennifer's Honda Civic appeared on the access road. Roman watched through his scope as his wife drove toward what she believed would be her husband's murder. Her car moved steadily, but not hurriedly, the pace of someone arriving for a planned meeting rather than responding to an emergency. Behind her, about half a mile back, the second set of headlights followed. Quarterback, confirm identity on the trailing vehicle. Casey's response took several seconds. Phantom, that's Steven Hansen's BMW. Looks like he decided not to stay in Las Vegas after all. Roman's jaw tightened. Hansen was supposed to be establishing his alibi, but apparently the temptation to watch his plan unfold had been too strong to resist. The man's arrogance was about to become his fatal weakness. Jennifer parked her car near the junkyard's main office and stepped out into the desert night. Even at 600 meters, Roman could see her nervous energy as she looked around the compound. She was wearing dark clothing, appropriate for someone who expected to witness violence. Steven's BMW stopped about 100 meters away, hidden behind a cluster of crushed vehicles. He emerged from his car, carrying what appeared to be binoculars, clearly planning to observe the operation from a safe distance. All stations, Alpha and Bravo, are now on site. Alpha is positioned approximately 100 meters southwest of the main office. Bravo is standing near the office building. Roman centered his crosshairs on Steven Hansen's chest. At this range, with perfect atmospheric conditions, he could put a bullet through the man's heart before Steven even heard the shot. It would be justice, clean, immediate, and final. But Roman forced himself to wait. The professional soldiers were the primary threat. Steven and Jennifer were targets of opportunity, but the armed team represented the immediate danger to his own personnel. Phantom, this is quarterback. The contractors are moving. Looks like they're positioning for the ambush. Through his scope, Roman watched the 6-man team deploy into assault positions around the compound. They moved with the confidence of professionals who'd done this kind of work before. Calm, methodical, deadly. Tango 1 took position near the main gate, assault rifle ready. Tango 2 moved to an elevated position on a pile of wrecked cars, establishing overwatch. Tango 3 and the three unknowns spread out to create interlocking fields of fire around the office building where Jennifer waited. It was a perfect ambush position. When Roman arrived, looking for his missing wife, he would be walking into a kill zone with no escape routes. Except Roman wasn't coming. He was already here. All stations, this is Phantom, Roman transmitted, his voice cold as winter. Enemy personnel are in position. Targets identified and acquired. On my command, we light them up. Roman settled his crosshairs on Tango 1, the team leader whose death would disrupt enemy coordination and create maximum confusion. The man was 612 meters away, standing in perfect profile, completely unaware that he was being watched by a sniper who'd never missed a shot when lives were on the line. Countdown from 10, Roman whispered into his radio. 10, 9, 8. His finger found the trigger with gentle precision. 7, 6, 5. The desert night was about to erupt in violence. 4, 3, 2. Roman's world contracted to the sight picture in his scope. Enemy target, crosshairs, steady breathing, gentle trigger pressure. 1. Execute. Chapter 7. The Reckoning begins. Roman's rifle spoke with the authority of judgment itself. The .338 Lapua Magnum round crossed 612 meters of desert air in 0.7 seconds, arriving with devastating precision at the exact center of Tango 1's chest. The team leader dropped instantly, his assault rifle clattering to the ground as his body collapsed behind a wrecked sedan. The sound of the shot rolled across the compound like thunder. Tango 1 is down, Roman transmitted with professional calm. Acquiring secondary targets. The remaining 5 men reacted with trained discipline, immediately seeking cover while scanning for the shooter's position. But they were looking for a ground-level threat, someone approaching the compound on foot. The elevated position, 600 meters away, remained invisible to their night vision. Roman shifted his aim to Tango 2, the Overwatch sniper positioned on top of the wrecked car pile. This was the most dangerous target, the one with the best view of the surrounding terrain and the training to identify Roman's firing position. Phantom, I have movement, Casey reported. Remaining targets are repositioning. Appears to be standard response to sniper fire. Tango 2 was already moving, recognizing the threat and seeking different cover. Roman led the target slightly, accounting for the man's movement speed and direction. The second shot cracked across the desert, and the enemy sniper spun sideways before tumbling from his elevated position. Tango 2 eliminated. The surviving contractors were now in full combat mode, establishing defensive positions while trying to locate the source of the incoming fire. Roman could hear their shouted commands echoing across the compound. Professional soldiers trying to regain control of a situation that had instantly turned against them. Thunder God, this is Phantom. Light up the compound. Luther's response was immediate. Massive floodlights erupted across the junkyard, turning night into blazing day. The surviving enemies were suddenly exposed, their night vision ruined, their positions revealed. Beautiful work, Thunder God. I have clear sight pictures on all remaining targets. Roman's third shot took out one of the unknown contractors, a man who'd been attempting to flank toward the office building where Jennifer stood frozen in shock. The bullet caught him center mass as he sprinted between 2 stacks of crushed vehicles. This is Quarterback, Casey's voice crackled through the radio, picking up panicked radio chatter from the surviving targets. They're requesting immediate extraction. Negative on extraction, Roman replied, settling his crosshairs on Tango 3. Nobody leaves. The fourth shot ended Tango 3's attempt to reach a better firing position. Roman's bullet found him as he dove behind a concrete barrier, the impact spinning the man around before he collapsed in the glaring light of Luther's floods. 2 contractors remained, both pinned down by the combination of Roman's precision fire and the blazing illumination that eliminated their tactical advantages. They were trapped in a kill zone, facing an enemy they couldn't see or effectively engage. Phantom, this is Thunder God. I have visual on Alpha and Bravo. Both targets appear to be in shock but uninjured. Roman swung his rifle toward Steven Hansen's position. The man was crouched behind his BMW, apparently unable to process how quickly his perfect plan had disintegrated into a massacre. Through his scope, Roman could see Stephen's face, pale with terror, eyes wide with the realization that he'd vastly underestimated his target. Jennifer remained standing near the office building, her body language suggesting complete psychological paralysis. She'd expected to watch her husband's murder. Instead, she was witnessing the systematic destruction of the team she'd helped hire to kill him. All stations, be advised I'm engaging Alpha. Roman centered his crosshairs on Stephen Hansen's torso. The man was 627 meters away, partially concealed behind his car, but presenting enough target for a clean shot. Roman's finger tightened on the trigger. A movement in his peripheral vision made him pause. One of the surviving contractors had managed to work his way closer to the office building, using the chaos and muzzle flashes to mask his approach. The man was now less than 50 meters from Jennifer's position, assault rifle raised. Roman made an instant tactical decision. Stephen would have to wait. He shifted his aim to the immediate threat and fired. His fifth shot caught the contractor mid-stride, dropping him less than 30 feet from where Jennifer stood. The final contractor broke from cover in a desperate attempt to reach the access road and escape. Roman tracked him through the scope, leading the running figure as he'd done countless times on battlefields around the world. The sixth shot ended the threat permanently. All stations, this is Phantom. All Tango targets are eliminated. Moving to secondary objectives. Roman swung his rifle back towards Stephen Hansen's position, but the BMW was already in motion. Hansen had used the final exchange of gunfire to start his car and begin a panicked retreat toward the access road. Quarterback, track Alpha. Don't let him reach the highway. Copy, Phantom. I've got him on satellite surveillance. He's moving fast, but erratically. Looks like panic driving. Roman rose from his firing position and began moving toward the compound. The long-range engagement was over. Now it was time for close-quarters resolution. Thunder God, status on Bravo? She's alive, but appears to be in shock. Standing near the office building, hasn't moved since the shooting started. Roman approached the junkyard at a tactical pace, rifle ready, but no longer expecting armed resistance. The six-man professional team lay scattered across the compound, testimony to what happened when trained killers met someone more trained and more motivated. As he reached the main gate, Roman keyed his radio one final time. All stations, compound is secure. Beginning final phase of operation. The hardest part was yet to come. Now he had to confront the woman he'd loved for 5 years. The woman who'd shared his bed while planning his death. Roman walked through the blazing light of Luther's floods, past the bodies of men who'd taken money to kill him, toward the wife who'd hired them. Jennifer hadn't moved, standing frozen near the office building like a statue carved from shock and disbelief. When she finally saw him approaching, her legs gave out. Jennifer Dyer collapsed to her knees in the dirt of Luther's junkyard, staring up at the husband she'd betrayed, surrounded by the consequences of her choices. "Hello, Jen," Roman said quietly. "We need to talk." Chapter 8. Truth and Consequences. Jennifer's face cycled through emotions like a broken kaleidoscope. Shock, disbelief, terror, and finally a desperate hope that somehow this was all a terrible misunderstanding. "Roman," her voice was barely a whisper. "Roman, what are you doing here? What happened to those men?" He stopped 10 feet away from her, close enough to see the tears streaming down her cheeks, but far enough to maintain tactical awareness. Even now, even knowing what she'd done, his instinct was to comfort her. 5 years of love didn't die easily, even when poisoned by betrayal. "I know about the plan, Jennifer. All of it." Her face went white. "What plan?" "Roman, I don't understand." "The life insurance policy. The meetings with Stephen Hansen. The private investigator who looked into my military record." Roman's voice was steady, professional, carrying no emotion whatsoever. "The emails about getting rid of me." Jennifer's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Roman could see her mind racing, trying to find some explanation that would make this all go away, some story that would restore the life she'd been living. "You read my emails," she said finally, and Roman almost laughed at the accusation in her voice, as if invasion of privacy was the real crime here. I read everything, Jen. The whole timeline. For months of planning my murder. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The words burst out of her like a dam breaking. The men Stephen hired, they were supposed to make it look like a robbery. You were supposed to die quickly, without knowing. And I was supposed to die too, so there wouldn't be any questions. Roman felt something cold settle in his chest. You were willing to die rather than just divorce me? You don't understand. Jennifer struggled to her feet, her hands shaking. Stephen said, "You'd never let me go." He said, with your military background, your training, he said you'd hunt us down if we just try to leave. So instead of asking for a divorce, you decided to have me killed. I was scared, Roman. You never talk about what you did in the army. All those years, all those missions you won't discuss. Stephen found out things about you, about the men you killed. The men I killed were enemies of this country, Roman interrupted. They were terrorists, war criminals, people who murdered innocent civilians. I never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. But Stephen said, Stephen Hansen is a liar and a coward who's probably halfway to Mexico by now. Roman's voice hardened. He hired 6 men to kill both of us, Jennifer. You were never going to survive this night. You were just another loose end. The truth hit Jennifer like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her hand going to her mouth. No, that's not. Stephen loves me. He wouldn't. He would. And he did. Check your phone, Jen. See if he's tried to contact you since the shooting started. With trembling fingers, Jennifer pulled out her phone. No messages. No missed calls. The man she'd betrayed her husband for had abandoned her the moment his plan went wrong. This is Phantom. Roman's radio crackled to life. Status on Alpha? Quarterback here. Alpha's vehicle crashed about 2 miles from the compound. Appears he lost control during high-speed flight. Emergency services are en route, but thermal imaging suggests he didn't survive the impact. Roman absorbed the information without emotion. Stephen Hansen had died as he'd lived, running away from the consequences of his actions. Copy, quarterback. What's ETA on emergency responders? 15 minutes for Sheriff's Department, 20 for paramedics. Roman looked at Jennifer, who was still staring at her silent phone. 15 minutes to decide her fate. Why, Jen? The question came out softer than he'd intended. 5 years of marriage. Was any of it real? Jennifer's face crumpled. All that was real, Roman. I loved you. I still love you. But Stephen showed me things about you, about your past. He made me afraid of what you might do if you found out about us. So, you decided to strike first. I didn't want to. I never wanted any of this. Jennifer was sobbing now, her careful composure completely shattered. But Stephen said it was the only way we could be together. He said you'd never let me go, that you'd kill us both if you found out. Roman studied his wife, the woman he'd thought he knew completely. Did you really believe I would hurt you? I don't know. Maybe. You never talked about the war, about what you did over there. And when Stephen showed me those classified files, the psychological evaluations that said you were dangerous, I was discharged because I refused to kill innocent people, Roman said quietly. The psychological evaluation said I had developed an unwillingness to engage civilian targets. They kicked me out because I grew a conscience, not because I lost one. Jennifer stared at him, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of her mistake. This is Thunder God. Luther's voice came through the radio. We've got vehicles approaching fast from the north. Looks like law enforcement. Roman keyed his radio. All stations, law enforcement is 5 minutes out. Execute extraction protocol. He looked at Jennifer one last time. In the harsh glare of the floodlights, surrounded by the bodies of the men she'd helped hire to kill him, his wife looked very small and very young. What happens now, she asked. Now you live with what you've done, Roman said. You tell the police that you were having an affair with Stephen Hansen, that he convinced you to come here tonight, that you witnessed him and his hired killer's attempt to murder your husband. You tell them I acted in self-defense. And then Roman shouldered his rifle and began walking toward the compound's rear exit. And then you never see me again. Roman, wait. Jennifer scrambled to her feet and ran after him. Please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can. There's no we anymore, Jen. Roman didn't stop walking. You made your choice 4 months ago. Now you get to live with it. Where will you go? Roman paused at the edge of the light, already fading into the shadows beyond the compound. Somewhere far away from here. Somewhere I can try to forget that the woman I love tried to have me killed. The sound of approaching sirens filled the desert air. Roman melted into the darkness beyond Luther's junkyard, leaving Jennifer alone with the consequences of her choices and the bodies of 6 men who died because she'd been too afraid to ask for a divorce. By the time the first police cruiser arrived on scene, Roman Dyer was gone, vanished into the Nevada desert like the ghost he'd always been. Behind him, Jennifer sat in the dirt beside Stephen Hansen's abandoned car, waiting to explain to the authorities how her perfect plan to murder her husband had destroyed everything she'd ever thought she wanted. Chapter 9. Ghost Protocol. 6 months later, Roman Dyer officially died in a car accident on a remote stretch of highway outside Tucson, Arizona. The body was too badly burned for positive identification, but dental records and DNA evidence confirmed the victim's identity. The local sheriff ruled it an accident. Driver fell asleep at the wheel, crossed the center line, hit a fuel truck head-on. Roman's funeral in Pine Ridge drew a modest crowd. Jennifer attended, dressed in black, accepting condolences from neighbors who whispered about the tragedy that had befallen the young widow. She played her part perfectly. The grieving wife tried to rebuild her life after losing her husband in that terrible incident at the junkyard. The official story had held up under investigation. Stephen Hansen, described as Jennifer's former lover, had hired 6 mercenaries to kill her husband. Roman had somehow turned the tables on his attackers, eliminating all 6 in what the FBI's Tactical Analysis Unit called the most professionally executed defensive operation in recent memory. Hansen himself had died while fleeing the scene, apparently losing control of his vehicle during high-speed flight. Jennifer received a settlement from Roman's life insurance policy, enough to pay off the mortgage and live comfortably, though far less than the windfall she and Stephen had originally planned. She kept teaching at Pine Ridge Elementary, accepted the community's sympathy, and tried to pretend that the nightmares would eventually stop. She never remarked the absence of a body at Roman's funeral, never mentioned that the casket felt too light when she touched it during the service. Some secrets were better left unspoken. 3,000 miles away, in a small fishing village on the coast of Maine, a man named Frank Morrison opened a charter boat business. He was quiet, competent, and had an uncanny ability to find fish even in the worst conditions. The locals liked him well enough, though he kept to himself and never talked about his past. Frank Morrison looked remarkably similar to the late Roman Dyer, but such resemblances weren't uncommon among men of a certain age and background. Besides, Roman Dyer was dead. The burned wreckage of his car had been all over the news. On quiet evenings, Frank would sit on his dock watching the sunset paint the Atlantic in shades of gold and crimson. Sometimes other boats would pull into the harbor, a converted trawler owned by a man named Lucas Reeves, a small yacht belonging to someone who called himself Carl Hansen. The 4 men would share a beer and talk about fishing, weather, and the simple pleasures of life by the sea. They never discussed their previous occupations, never mentioned the specialized skills that had brought them together years ago in places most Americans couldn't pronounce. They were retired now, officially and permanently out of the business of violence. But sometimes, late at night, when the fog rolled in from the ocean, Frank Morrison would remember a woman with green eyes and auburn hair who'd shared his bed while planning his death. He'd tried to love her completely, tried to become the kind of man who deserved a quiet life with a good woman. Instead, he learned that some people were poison disguised as medicine, that trust could be weaponized, and that the capacity for betrayal lived in places he'd never thought to look for it. Jennifer Dyer had taught him that lesson with the thoroughness of a master instructor. She'd shown him that the wolf never truly became a sheep, no matter how carefully he learned to bleat. Frank Morrison was grateful for the education, even as he mourned its necessity. On the first anniversary of Roman Dyer's death, Jennifer received a package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a sunset over the ocean, peaceful and beautiful. On the back, written in careful block letters, was a single word: goodbye. Jennifer burned the photograph and tried to convince herself it was just a coincidence, just some piece of junk mail that had gotten mixed up in her delivery. But she moved out of Pine Ridge the following week, relocating to her sister's city across the country, changing her name back to Jennifer Hoffman. She told people she needed a fresh start, needed to escape the memories of her tragic loss. What she didn't tell them was that she'd finally learned the difference between a quiet mechanic and a professional ghost. Roman Dyer had been the mechanic, kind, trusting, willing to believe the best of people even when they showed him their worst. Frank Morrison was the ghost, patient, watchful, and utterly merciless when crossed. Jennifer had killed the mechanic with her betrayal, but in doing so, she'd birthed something far more dangerous. Now that ghost walked the world under a different name, carrying skills that most people only encountered in their nightmares. She'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for, Jennifer realized. She wanted Roman Dyer dead, and he was. The man who remained was someone else entirely, someone she'd created through her choices, someone who would always know exactly where to find her if he decided she'd learned enough from being allowed to live. In her new apartment, in her new city, with her new name, Jennifer Hoffman locked her doors every night and tried to forget that some lessons were taught by teachers who never stopped watching their students. Miles away, on a dock in Maine, Frank Morrison watched the stars reflect on dark water and thought about the wife he'd loved and the woman who'd tried to kill him. They weren't the same person, he'd finally realized. They'd never been the same person. The wife had died in Luther's Junkyard the night Jennifer pulled the trigger on their marriage. What remained was a stranger who looked like someone he'd once loved, someone who'd earned her freedom through proximity to genuine remorse and the mercy of a man who'd grown tired of killing. Frank raised his beer to the memory of Roman and Jennifer Dyer, a couple who'd died together on a summer night in the Nevada desert. Then he finished his drink, locked up his boat, and walked home to the small house by the sea where he slept peacefully every night. Behind him, the ocean whispered against the shore with the sound of waves washing away footprints, erasing the past, carrying secrets to depths where they could rest undisturbed. The ghost had found his peace at last. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see